Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session from the RPA Vanguard channel. My name is Andy Menon. In this session, we'll be talking about how to convert a previously non-public app into an app in the public domain. Let's get started. What I have here is an app that was previously non-public, which has now been made public for the purposes of this session. And at first, I thought that I'm going to create a simple app and demonstrate how to publish it as a public app. But then for many reasons that I will be specifying in the next section, I thought that it is better to take an existing non-public app and then convert that into a public app, and in that process, kind of go through the steps that were required for me to go from being non-public to public, right? So with that, in the next section, we'll just go over this app and understand what it does, and then go about converting this app from being non-public to public. So there is enough documentation to get started on the UiPath documentation page for public apps, and I initially referred to this documentation and then did some research, and based on that, I went about converting my non-public app to a public app. So with that, let's let's switch to this app and see what it actually does. And I know that I can completely ignore the detail, but then you will not have enough context. And without understanding the functionality of the app, I think it is pretty dangerous to take something out of the non-public domain and put it into public domain, right? If you do not understand the features your app is using, and if you do not understand the seriousness of the operations your app was doing when it was non-public, and you take the same thing and put it in public domain, then you're creating a very dangerous situation, right? And therefore, I just want to go over what this app does. So this app basically is a UI for a background process that's been running on my home network for a while, right? So there is a Raspberry Pi that is sitting in my garage, right? And the Raspberry Pi runs a Python script that captures, images of my garage, because the Raspberry Pi has got a camera, and the script operates the camera at a certain frequency, say maybe once an hour, maybe, I forget. But and what it does is it uploads the file to the storage bucket in the automation cloud, and it also posts a queue item, right? So here is the script. I'm just going to breeze through it. This is the Python script, and this is running on the Raspberry Pi. And I'm just going to go through some highlights here. If we go all the way up top, you see there is the UiPath storage bucket API functions, and then above that is the function to get the Orchestrator APIs, and then it uses that, and then it generates an upload URL for the storage bucket, and in the next step it uploads the file to the storage bucket, and then it also posts an item to the queue. So what happens is when the item is posted to the queue, it triggers a background service robot, and the service robot makes a record of that of that image that has been stored in the storage bucket into a backend data service. And we need the records in the data service to audit the images that have been stored in the storage bucket, right? And here is the queue, and you see it's been triggered. And when it is triggered, it invokes a background service robot, And that service robot, takes the detail of the image and makes a record of it in the data service entity. And here you can see that it's the process name is named Watcher 2022 Q processor, right? So that is the operational, that's the source of truth. Basically, the Raspberry Pi originates these images and then populates the storage bucket and also populates the data service, right? Now, this app, which was previously a non-public app, has access to the same orchestrator folder. It has access to the same data service and also storage bucket, right? So when I bring up this app, it shows me a list of all the images audited in data service, right? And you can see that there is this information on the image name and also the date and time at which it was captured. So we could sort this. We could get the latest. Today is September 3rd, and you can see that it is capturing those images. And if I click on any one of these images, the app looks for a corresponding image file in the storage bucket and renders it here on the image viewer, right? And no matter where I am in the world, if I have access to the internet, I can come to the automation cloud, log in, and run this app and see what's going on in the garage, right? Here, of course, the images are obscured, but believe me, I can see them when I am going through my app. So that is why you need the record of images in the storage bucket as well as data service, so that you can manage the records of these images. Now, in addition to viewing these images, this app can also delete an image individually, right? For example, if I think that this image is not required, if I hit this button, the image is deleted, right? But you can't keep deleting one image at a time. It's laborious and inconvenient. So there is what's called as a sweep functionality. Basically, if the images have to be deleted in bulk, right, I can select a certain set of images. And for example, if I want to delete the oldest 24 images, right, let us say these images have been accumulating from the last 8 weeks, and I want to delete the oldest of the 24 images, I can select 24 images. Similarly, I can select 48, 72, all the way up to 168, right? And I'm going to select the oldest 24 images, and I'm going to hit sweep, and I hope it works. So if I hit sweep, you can see that there is a notification saying, hey, the process has received the request to delete the oldest 24 images. Check back after some time. Now, if I go into the orchestrator, you can see that a background process is running, right? And if I go into those logs and refresh, you see that it is deleting these files from the storage bucket, but at the same time, it is also deleting the corresponding entity records for those files from the data service entity, right? So once it has completed, so it takes a few seconds, and once it has done that, right, all these files and data service entity records are permanently deleted from the the orchestrator storage bucket as well as the backend data service, right? So why I wanted to give you this overview is that this app pretty much works with almost every other technology stack of UiPath, right? It works with queues. It works with storage buckets. It works with the data service, right? And therefore, I thought that this app is a good use case to take from the non-public domain and put it into public domain and see what problems I'm going to be facing, right? And that is what we'll be looking into for the rest of this session. Okay, now let's start with the first step of working on a public app. There are multiple ways to do this, and by far the easiest way is when you're creating a new app, you mark that app as public and then work on it as a public app, right out of the gate. But my recommendation is, if you do not know or do not understand the ramifications of making something public over the open internet, if you don't know, how much of a security problem it's going to cause by taking the app you're working on and putting it in public domain, I would recommend that you assume that this app is non-public and create the app as a non-public app, work on it, understand its ramifications, understand the implications of making it public, and then go about converting it from a non-public to a public app. And if you are an orchestrator administrator, or an automation cloud administrator, good, you know what you're doing. But if not, you might need help from an orchestrator admin and or the automation cloud admin to understand what is required for you to move something from a non-public domain to a public domain, right? So I personally would not follow this. I would create my app as a non-public app and then move it into public domain, right? But that's just my thought, right? So this is one method of starting out with the public app from the get-go. The other method is, if you already have the apps coded, if you already have a non-public app, here you can see that I had this app as a non-public app and I backed it up, right? And this is the non-public version of it. And then the clone of it was converted to a public app. And you can see the distinction. There is a globe icon, which indicates that this app is public. So how do we make that distinction? Because this is non-public and most of my apps are non-public, but this is public. So what you do is you edit this app, go into the settings, here, this gear wheel icon, and get into manage access and mark this app as public, right? So I've already, so once you do this, once you take a non-public app and mark it public, and if you publish it and try to access it over the, if you try to run the app, you will run into issues because you have still not created those roles and the tenant roles and the folder roles that are required for you to access this app over the over open internet. So if you did that, you will probably see something like this, right? You will see something like this, right? So as soon as I mark my non-public app as public, and then I try to access the app after publishing it, I had not yet created any roles, I had not created any permissions, you would run into this URL, this error page when you try to access the app, right? So this means that you have to go in and create the proper roles and permissions for you to operate this app in the public domain, right? We'll take a look at that next. So here is a good tabulated presentation of what are the roles that we have to create. And if you look at webhooks, this is a tenant level role. All the other roles that you're seeing will be folder level roles, right? I've already created those in the Orchestrator. So I'm going to switch to Orchestrator. I'm going to go to tenant and manage access. And I go to roles. Now, this is specific to how I have created them. You are free to create it any way you want. But in my case, what I've done is I've taken each of these roles and created them individually, right? So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have created them separately so that I can add them or remove them if I need to based on the requirements, right? So if I go back to the orchestrator and I have named them a certain way. So if I say public, external, if I did that, you see all the roles that I have created show up because they have been named a certain way, right? Now, I did this for two reasons. One is, if you look at the nomenclature, the naming convention, from the name, it is evident what the purpose of this role is, right? Now, let me go over a couple of them randomly just to give you an idea of how the naming convention actually matches with what that role does, and then you will get the idea on why this has been created the way it has been created. So let's go to the first one, and if I bring up the role in the edit mode, you can see that jobs create, right? That's what this role says. App, public app, job, create role, right? Similarly, if I go to the tenant level role, edit, and if I go in here, it says webhook, view, create tenant role. So I know what it, from the description, I know what it does. So I can go there directly to clarify that it's indeed what it does. So webhooks, view, and create. So you see, naming the roles can make it a little bit easier for us to manage how you are dealing with these roles, right? If you give it some random name, and then you don't know what it is doing, and then you might have some kind of confusion as the number of roles pile up. So you get the idea on how these roles work. So following the tabulation of the roles here, I have created those here in the orchestrator, right? Now I've created it this way because it's easier for me to add each role and take off each role. For example, I'm not still very clear if your app is not interacting with storage bucket, whether you will need both these roles, right? Whether you need anything in the storage bucket or storage files, related area of your app. Because if your app is not working with those, why do you need those roles? So you might be able to take them off, right? But if you create one jumbo role, one massive role, then it might become difficult for you to assign these roles to different public apps as you are publishing more public apps, right? So that is why I, kind of created it this way. In the next step, we have to bring the public app and the roles together under a target folder. We'll take a look at that next. One of the things that you would want to understand is this little note here, right? About public apps, right? There's a note here, and it matters because you got to understand how to refer to this app as you are working with data service or orchestrator, right? It says that these public apps begin with a prefix UiPath -apps, right? It matters. It might look trivial, but it matters. So if this is my app, this is my user-friendly name of the app, right? A public app will be known as known with this internally. I'm telling you internally, and it will make sense as we go through the subsequent steps. But remember, this is internally, the app is recognized as UiPath apps. I think I hope I got the prefix right. UiPath apps dash the name of your app, right? So this is the app that I started with. It was called Cam Viewer, but when I made it public, it's internally recognized with this prefix UiPath apps Cam Viewer. And you will need to keep this in mind and remember this because it matters when you are finally deploying the app in the orchestrator, right? Now, coming to the orchestrator, in the previous two sections, you marked the app as public. You created the roles. Now it's time to bring both of these together in your orchestrator folder, right? So if I go to the tenant level and go to folders, and this is the target folder I've chosen. I usually put these temporary works in shared. And here, when you come to the attributes of your folder, and you click on this button, assign account group. So this is where the naming convention of the apps that I just mentioned comes into play. Now, look at the labeling of this control. It says account group or external app, right? So it's important to understand it's an external app, right? So if I look for Cam Viewer, which is my friendly name, you won't find it, right? But if I do UiPath Apps, there it is, right? You see now internally, if you have built a public app in App Studio, it is recognized by the orchestrator, it is recognized by data service with this internal prefix, right? So UiPath -apps the name of your app. And once you find the matching public app, you select the app. Now, in my case, I've added this app already to this folder. So it is showing that I cannot add it because it's already been added and I need to edit it. But when I click on the edit button, you will get the same screen that I'm seeing right now. And this is where you bring the app, the public app, and its roles together. So if I hit edit, you can see that I have added all the roles that I need to add in this box, right? So if I click on this and say public external app, you see I have all the roles that are grouped together in my search results, which is easy for me to manage. And I can select the roles that I want, right? And add them here. If I don't want any of the roles that this app doesn't require, I can remove those, right? So I'm not going to do anything here because my app has already got the roles it requires. So once you have done adding, you hit assign. And once you hit assign and come back to your folder detail, you will see your app listed here. Remember, it is still recognized as the internal name, and it's recognized as an external app. And if you look at the roles, all the roles that you created in the previous section have been applied, right? So this is how you bring the relationship between the orchestrator folder, the roles, and the public app from App Studio together, right? So now you have grouped everything under this shared folder. The next step would be for us to deploy this app, right? Remember, when you are deploying an automation, you upload a package, right? Once you upload a package to the package feed, you then create a process out of it, right? And this process there of deploying the app is pretty similar to that, right? You have taken the public app, you have associated it with your folder. The next thing that you're going to be doing is making a publicly available version of that deployment, right? By deploying this app in your folder. We'll take a look at that next. So coming back to the orchestrator, we already know that the public app has been targeted to be deployed to the shared folder. So I go to tenant, I go to shared, and I go to processes. There is a tab called apps, and you click on apps. And then just like you add a process, you add an app, right? You see, you deploy an app, right? So I have already deployed my app, but I will show you, the process again. So I say deploy app. Remember what I had said about the names. This time, your orchestrator is familiar with what app you want to deploy. So if you go in here and say UiPath apps, you won't find it. You got to go with your user-friendly name, right? Because now your orchestrator is familiar with the app. So now you can refer to this app as Cam Viewer, which is its official user-friendly name, right? So you select the matching app, and then whatever version that you had latest will be, you can select the version that you want to deploy. And the cool thing is all the versions are tracked here, right? And when you deployed your app, any comment that you added will be visible here. Now, I think that you can delete this and add your own comment. So I have not tried it, but you are free to try it. And the other thing is you might want to give your app a descriptive name. You can keep the same user-friendly name, but you can give something like this just to be very clear on what that app does. Demo public app, right? So here, I'm not only giving it the official name, but I'm also making it very clear that this is a public app, but it's a temporary demo app, right? So once you've filled in all of this, and when you hit deploy, right, you should be seeing a listing like this under your apps tab of your target folder, right? The first thing from this listing is the publicly facing name, right, that you put in cam viewer public app, right? And it's got a globe, which indicates that this app is in the public domain now. And then this link, when you click on it, it takes you directly to your App Studio, and you can open the app in edit mode to edit this app. And of course, the version. And then the other functionality is this run button. Of course, when you run this, when you hit this button, it will open in the same session as your Orchestrator now, because you're already logged in. But a better way and a more reliable way to test it is to click on the ellipsis, copy the URL, and then open. So I'm going to close this app here. I don't need this here. I'm going to close this here and open an incognito window or a private window, as you see in Edge, and then paste this URL in an incognito window, right? And now my app is rendered. Here you can see that my app is listing all the data that is there in my background, my backend data service entity. One of the things that you got to note here is that in this case, I am exposing minimal information on the data that's in my backend data service entity. It's just the name of the file and the date. And therefore, I have not disabled the everyone data service entity role, because I know that I'm using a very minimal exposure to view the information that's in my background entity. But we'll come to that in the next few steps. But what I understand now is my app is able to interact with, at least view the records in my backend data service entity. Now, when I click on an image here, I want to see whether it's able to get that image from the storage bucket and render it here. So the fact that I'm able to click on the data service record and get this image out here means that my app is now able to view the files that are in storage bucket and also render them in my app. So the roles that have been added for storage bucket and storage files also seems to be working. The other thing that you saw in action earlier was the sweep functionality. So when I selected the number of records to be swept, you already saw that it is able to create a job in the target folder, right? So I know that it works. So it gives you an illusion that your app is working fine. Everything is okay. But there is this functionality where, this button can surprise me, because I thought that everything works. And then after a couple of days, when I came back, I rarely use this button, but after a couple of days, I came back and I clicked on this button and I had an epic failure. So I thought everything works. No, you see, there was a failure. So this brings us to an important part of configuring your app for public domain, and it has got to do with how your app interacts with the background or the backend data service entity, and what are the roles that are required for you to fix this problem, right? This is very important. You might not want to miss this section. So we'll take a look at that next.